Practitioners. I actually, I want to kind of talk about practitioners. As you guys know, it's identity and trauma, crisis, identity crisis, and trauma. So practitioners, so it says many adoption practitioners, okay, they encourage adoptive parents to choose contact because they believe it facilitates children understanding and adoption, ultimately foster adoptive families. So I think this is probably the most, if you are in this particular field in the mental health, then it is very, very important for you to be cognizant of and aware of what it takes in order to understand how to work with this population, right? Because you cannot treat a person with substance abuse the same as you would treat someone with, let's say, phobias of cats, right? It just does not make sense. And so I wanted to kind of pinpoint this particular area for practitioners, whether if you are a social worker. I know we have a lot of adoptive parents in this training, but I wanted to kind of pinpoint this in particular because this is near and dear to my heart. And I actually got a chance to go to Indianapolis to meet a lot of other adopted parents, a lot of other adoptees, a lot of other people that are in this particular field, from you name it, from California all the way up until Washington, from all the way up until Maine, all the way down to Florida. And so just kind of seeing what it is and what it takes in order to be competent, I wanted to talk about this a little bit. So it says, there are a couple of things that will kind of help you. Of course, we have the trauma-based, that particular training that is something that allows you to be aware of, the particular traumas that occur in adoptees, right? There are a lot of it says complex developmental trauma, complex developmental disorder. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of those, but those are these particular things are something that is very important in order to be competent, because it is a piece of the adoptees, right? And so it does add up, and it affects, the developmental of the brain. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this particular thing, like flipping your lid. These particular things, as it relates to the brain, it flips the lid. It's a trauma response, right? And so these particular things is something, and it creates a hyperactivity fight, flight, or freeze response, right? So let's say, for example, let's say a child is coming to you and they do not explain that they are adopted. You're just treating the trauma, but you're not treating the actual thing that caused the trauma, right? And if they tell you, hey, I was adopted at 15, that means that they have some things that they remember about that particular trauma, right? So these particular things has to be something that should be taken into consideration, right? Okay, next slide. culture. So as you all know, yes, I wore my Cuba shirt today because that is a part of my culture. And if you were not present during the first presentation, I explained that I am also an adoptee, right? So I understand not only the personal perspectives of this particular field, but I understand the professional. And that is what makes me so valuable to say, hey, I actually experienced this, right? And I'm doing this in order to help other adoptees, to help other practitioners, to help other people become aware of those particular barriers and how to work with this population, right? So the culture, I'll go straight into it. So it says it creates a risk of accounting the differences between the child and the appearances, right? And so it should be a race to construct a family, right? With the success of adoption of the child's development, it depends on the child's inscription of the intergenerational history of the adopted parents. That means that if you have a family that is of a different ethnicity, for example, I am a transracial adoptee. What transracial adoptee considers is a different culture of the family that actually adopts the family, actually adopts the child. So you have a Caucasian family that says, hey, I think I want to adopt a child of an alternative ethnicity or a culture. Maybe there is an international culture, right? So these things should be taken into consideration. And what the particular thing is saying in the first paragraph is it's like, hey, this child not only has its own culture that they develop within themselves, but the culture of the adoptive family. So there's two things that come together. And so that just means, hey, that child is going to take up on all of these different cultures, right? So it says the cultural competence of adoptees in the culture of birth is developed through the participation of cultural activities. So if you have a child that is adopted, you know, it's very important to not only address your particular culture, but make sure that you address their culture, i.e., if this child is an international adoptee from Russia, if this child is an international adoptee from Spain, wherever this child comes from, if this is a United States adoption, if this is a Texas adoption, you know, find out where they are and what their culture is. And I know there are different adoption agencies that do release the information that tells you, hey, this child came from a Caucasian family. This child came from a African-American family. This child comes from a Ethiopian culture. And so just making sure that you not only incorporate that particular culture of yourself, but you let that child know, hey, you are, you know, your culture is Spaniard, your culture is Cuban, you know. These particular things was not actually addressed with me as I was a child growing up, but I took on the culture of my adoptive family, which was African American. And so coming from that particular era and area, I was not really completely aware of your dad is from Mexico and your mom is an immigrant in Cuba. And so I'm like, okay, but my mom is African American. I mean, my mom is an immigrant from Cuba, right? But my dad is from you know, Mexico, or you know, some different things. So it was like a culture shock, right? How many of you all have ever worked with an adoptee that comes from a different culture? I want you guys to put that into the chat box. You know, what culture means to you and why is it important to make sure that you address these particular things? So put those things in the chat box. This includes, you know, holidays. This includes meals where the traditional food of the country of birth served, developing awareness of traditions, right? So no, seriously, y'all can put that in the chat box. I really seriously am paying attention to it. So my actual point was, why is culture important to address in that particular adoptee's life? Well, it tells them, hey, you're from this particular, exactly. It gives them a sense of identity. It lets them know, hey, we're African American, or we are Caucasian, and this is something that, is important, and then why it's important. And this is, that helps them become aware, exactly, their identity. And we are talking about, different things that will allow that adoptee to understand where they come from. It says listening to music, seeing films from that country, becoming conscious of one's physical resemblance of people of the same ethnic and cultural group, right? So it just gives them that awareness of, where they come from, all in a nutshell. Next slide. So this is a picture of my adoptive family, right? You'll see my father. I was raised in West Texas. That is actually Midland, Texas. I did see that we have some West Texas workers on this particular training, but my brother, he was actually adopted as well, and he's the one in the purple. The little girl on the bottom is actually my niece. She wanted to be in the picture, so we was like, hey, come on, you can join in. She's super, super amazing. That is one particular, she means a lot to me, but my adoptive mother is the one wearing red under her shirt. And my father, he's holding my hat, actually. That was my hat that I had on my head. This is a picture of when we were celebrating my father's, I believe his 80th birthday. And so the actual, I want to say not vibe, but the theme was country, because I'm a country girl, but I am from Dallas, right? If you were not present during the presentation, I did mention that I was adopted out of Dallas, Texas. It is now called CASA, and I believe it was called Focus years ago, but this is the family that adopted me, and I love them to death. They particularly taught me a lot about life. And there are some things, if you were present during my first presentation, I mentioned that a lot of my trauma came from my childhood, because I was in a very reserved family. My family, I did not get a chance to do the things that a lot of kids did. And so for that reason, I was very sheltered. A lot of my abuse did come from while I was adopted. So although this looks like a normal family, right? But you see, with the exception of my little niece on the bottom, nice boots, by the way, you will see that I do not have the same skin tone as my adopted family. But in the same area, I considered myself to be African American. I just, my skin, I always knew something was different about me kind of growing up. I was like, wait a minute, I don't look like them, right? My skin is different. Why don't I have the same hair as them? And so it was a very hard childhood, kind of knowing, hey, I don't look like them, but where's my own family? Why are people asking me, hey, is that your grandmother? Is that your aunt? That's not your real family. There are things that really happened in my life. And I've also, through research, found out that there are other adoptees that did experience the fact that they were questioned about their adoption. And so growing up, it was a very culture shock. The previous slide talks about culture, right? And so I just was like, I don't look like my family. I did not fit in. I did not fit in, no matter what my family did, no matter how many events that I went to about, it is Black History Month. No matter how many events that I did attend, I just knew something was different, and I did not actually find that out until I was an adult. So I cannot stress enough to you all to make sure, if you are a social worker, if you're working in this field, if you are an adoptive parent, please, 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 from the bottom of my heart, please address that particular culture. Find out where that child comes from, because they're going to be like, I look like this, but I don't sound like that. So they're just going to be like confused, and it's going to create a lot of other things within their lives as they grow up. So it says similarities in skin tone, in their hair texture, as you guys know, even similarities in voice, right? So in an adopted family, you may have none of that. Like I said, my hair was like different, and I was like, something's not right. I know my family is African American, but I have this hair. Where did it come from? Maybe the goose met the cat, and the cat met the goose, and then the goose realized, hey, no. So it was like all kinds of stuff that I was just like considering. I was like, maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I was just brought down by the goose. And the cat decided, hey, I know that's a weird way to say it, but literally that is how our minds think. And so it says adopted families look different. Therefore, they must be prepared to answer questions like, why don't you look like your mom? Like I said, you're white, or why do you have a Black sister? Like I said, this comes with the territory. This definitely comes with the territory. And it is probably one of the most uncomfortable territories to be in, to have questions asked. Why don't you look like your mom? Is that your grandmother? Although, you are in front of if you are an adoptive parent, although you probably don't really, have these questions asked to you in front of you, do not discriminate that your child is like not being asked these questions while they're at school, while they're with their families, because I can guarantee you it is a questionable thing, and they probably don't know how to answer the question. Next slide. Okay, open adoptions, right? How many of you all know about open adoptions? I do know that there are open adoptions mean that the child can actually have the family come, of their biological family to come in and be in their life or provide support. There are a lot of things that open adoptions can provide. I know that I do have a friend that has an open adoption, and they ask me questions. Hey, what do I do if the mother comes back into their life? And I said, well, hey, it depends on that child's development. If they are in the stage of, maybe they're 3 or 4 years old, they might not really understand yet, but just give them time in order to understand, hey, this is your mom, but we're also your mom, or however you want to explain to them, hey, this is who this person is, and this is why it happens. But also be ready for the uncomfortable feeling. There is another slide that kind of talks about that. So I'm not going to actually get into that, but it says their birth parents will also get to watch them grow and feel involved with their successes, hopes, and dreams. So I'll be very transparent in this moment and say that when I reunited with my biological grandmother, she was so uncomfortable and she had so much guilt. I mean, like, just imagine coming from a different country and having a daughter and wanting a better life for her. And then you get here and she dies. She dies, And when she dies, there's a sense of guilt that you feel. And so these things I had to kind of take into consideration when I was reuniting with my biological family. In the first presentation, I mentioned, hey, I did not know how to reach my family because I didn't have any information, right? My name changed. My social security, my number changed. There are things that I wanted to have from her that I could not have, but reuniting with my family, it brought closure, right? It brought closure, and it brought things into perspective to where I'm able to understand and function in life in order to be successful. So my grandmother, she actually, when we reunited, I noticed that she always felt guilt about her daughter, which was my mother that I never met, right? She passed away in prison way before I can even meet her. I believe I was 18 years old when I was like, I'm ready to meet my mom. Woo! No, it didn't happen. But of course, I'm a spiritually led person. I do have a strong faith that all things work together. You cannot control the past, but you can live in the future. And so, I had to accept this, which was probably one of the hardest things to accept. But guilt, is something that my grandmother felt. But I believe that if you are in an open adoption, that will allow the mother to see that child grow up and develop into a very strong and healthy individual. And so my grandmother didn't get a chance to do that. And then you imagine 20 to 30 something years later, and here's this same child that was not given up, but taken away because they felt as though this child would be in a better situation as compared to the biological family. And so I suggest that if you are in an open adoption, feel comfortable and know that that child, no one knows that child more than you, no matter if it's a biological aspect, no matter if it's something to where you feel uncomfortable or you feel insecure about allowing that mother to be in their life, but just know that you are protected. There is on the bottom, it says a child might not feel comfortable having a relationship with their birth parents and feel forced to stay in touch. So I'm saying to you, also consider that child's life before you actually depend or decide to come into an open adoption. Think about their life as they get older. Alternatively, there are adoptive children that don't want anything to do with their family. Maybe I believe that the older they get, the more aware that they become. And that is simply because they know and they've experienced a lot more trauma. And so they remember those things, the flashbacks, the things that allowed them to be taken away. So there are things that they feel uncomfortable, that makes them feel uncomfortable. So the birth and adoptive parents may also have conflicts regarding on how to raise the child. You know, um, as said, it's kind of like a divorce, a bad divorce. When you get into, a divorce, it's grief. Some families, they experience the rejection, the neglect, the abandonment. They're fighting for this child to have this custody of this child. Also consider those things too. If you are in an open adoption, it can be detrimental to this child's psychology, watching the adults fight over them. As I said, adoption is trauma. Adoption is trauma. And, it makes no sense to say, to say that it's not going to happen. And so I want to be honest with you and just to know it won't be a pretty picture. It won't look like flowers and blooming. It won't be like the Cowboys winning the Super Bowl. It won't look like that. It'll look like, people getting hurt, and these are some things that really that I wanted to pinpoint. And if you are in an open adoption, or you allow an open adoption to occur with that particular family. Next slide. Okay, activity time. I feel like Blue's Clues. I feel like Steve. on Blue's Clues whenever he's like, we just got a letter. We just got a letter. I wonder who it's from. Doo-ka-doo-ka-doo-ka-doo. Yeah, I literally feel like that when I said activity time. So this is the time, as you know, I know you guys are getting the CEUs. I know you guys are probably required to do this training. But I highly, I want to be intentional, and like I said, self-care is so important, especially when you're dealing with a lot of different things as it relates to these childs, and seeing what they've dealt with on their common applications, whenever they're trying to get placed. I actually do work in a residential treatment facility that is actually it's a shelter, and so a lot of times I receive their common applications, or to find out, hey, why was this child put up for adoption. So I want you guys to answer these questions. There are 4 questions, okay, and those questions are: what does identity mean to you? And this next question, I was thinking, I was like, okay, good Super Bowl, wonderful game, woo! But I'm really here for the commercials, right? So I want to know, what was your favorite commercial during the Super Bowl and why? And then the next one is, which emoji describes you the most? And then the last one, why is self-care so important? And I'm going to tell you guys a little story about this picture that I put on the right side. This is a picture of my close friends that I don't know if I mentioned this during my last training, but I provide group facilitating for a national organization that is called Adoptees Connect. And so I actually put together I partnered with other organizations to provide this particular meetup. And of course, as you see, it's very small, but these are my friends, okay? And if you see, we all look different. We all have different ethnicities. I see I'm generally a happy person. Keep the questions coming in. Identity is what you see as, okay, go back. Okay. Woo. So all of these people in this picture are adopted. They were adopted as infants. There are some international adoptees. There are some domestic adoptees. These are my friends. One of them was adopted from Russia. One of them currently lives in Canada. I was actually on the phone with her the other day, and we were talking about kind of what motivates us in order to continue to do what we have, to do what we do. But I definitely, adoption is near and dear to my heart. But yeah, these are some of the people that I provide group facilitating for. There are also some close friends. This is within Texas. This isn't everybody. There's like hundreds of us, but I am one of the group facilitators for, I call it Texas, but it's really Dallas Fort Worth. But I welcome everybody to join the group. Identity, all the ingredients of you. Let's see what else means you are, and you are one identity. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Christy. So yeah, keep the responses coming in. What does identity mean to you? Favorite commercial of the Super Bowl and why? Which emoji describes you the most? Why is self-care so important? Favorite commercials, don't miss who you are and what you think. Thank you, Andalyn. Appreciate it. But yeah, this picture, is of my friends. How do you view and describe yourself? Thank you, Allison. Whoop, 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 whoop. Everything that makes me, Faith. Thank you, Kristen, and panelists. Smiley face, very important for your mental health. It is indeed. I made a TikTok the other day. Yeah, nevertheless, it was pretty cool. Next slide. You can still continue on answering the questions if you'd like. Ooh, some of you guys are like, oh wait. Someone's put an emoji like the shades. Cool. I don't remember the commercials. That's okay. No worries. So we are going to go into the closed adoptions. So I hope you guys can see it on the left side about the closed adoption. So I was actually a part of the closed adoptions. And if you were kind of listening in between the time of answering those questions, all of those people in that picture was adopted. And so some of them were in closed adoptions, some of them were international adoptions. You know, some of them have a hard time getting, receiving access to their biological informations because there is a thick skin. I want to say like thick skin, but there's a thin line per se that comes when trying to reunite or find out your biological roots, right? So it was hard. One of the things that we talked about was what was identity and what was your trauma and how did you overcome that? So they were part of the closed adoptions. And I'm mentioning the closed adoptions simply because, you know, in the state of Texas, records are sealed by law. Just to kind of explain to you how I found out my information was, I was Inspector Gadget. I was Inspector Gadget. Yeah, I was that inspector. I was so gung-ho about finding out who I was, right? I was like, I'm going to find out who I was. If it's the last thing I did, I'm going to find out. But I wasn't able to do that until I was 18 years old. And so, yes, records are sealed by law. In order to request the closed adoption records in the Texas Department of Family Protective Services, they must have been involved in the placement and adoption of the adoptee, right? I didn't want my adopted family knowing that I was trying to find out information, so I could not do it until I was 18. So, closed adoptions. If you have shortcomings or are unable to provide the best care of your child, they will not feel let down. Focused on being loved by their adoptive parents, the child will not feel as though they need to split between themselves because there's two sets of the parents. And these are some things that I guess it's the pros. Clydesdale horses. Hey, I remember that, Cheryl. I remember that commercial. It was so funny. And then I also saw the one with I can't think of his name, but he's like the person that was in the movie, I don't want to say Liar. That's what it was. The cable guy. So Jim Carrey was, okay, sorry. I had a moment, right? But that was my favorite, commercial. He was like, cable guy. Okay, back to the closed adoptions. Woohoo. So these are the pros and the cons of closed adoptions. As a birth parent, you will get complete closure in choosing a closed adoption and move on with your life. So that means that if that child is placed up for adoption and it's a closed adoption, you know, as like myself, my name changed. my birth certificate changed. My name's on the birth certificate. It now stated my adopted family's information, but it was so hard. Like I said, I was Inspector Gadget. It's like, I'm going to find out and I don't care what happens. I'm going to do it if it's the last thing I do. So, but this provides, if it is a closed adoption, this provides that closure, you know. Also, a birth parent might change their minds and decide that they want to be involved in the child's life in a later stage. So if you have ever dealt with a case that the birth parents are now coming to you, trying to get information about their child that was placed up for adoption, this is something that they might come and bother you and tell you, not bother, but actually come to you and say, hey, where's my child? I changed my mind. You know, this is something that I want to do. Where's my child? You know, within closed adoptions, they can't do that because that file is sealed, signed, and delivered. Signed, sealed, delivered. So your child might not also know where they come from or what their medical history is. So that is something that I deal with. Give me a second because hold on. Water break. Okay, so I actually did not know my medical history, right? And so that was one of the struggles that I had growing up. And I was like, man, so you're saying I will never find out if I have heart issues? I will never find out if I have like foot issues, or like maybe my big toe is gonna fall off, or like maybe my eye is gonna start twitching like this when I get older. I didn't know those things, but I was like, man, you know what? That was another reason why I decided, hey, I want to find out where I come from or what my medical history is, right? Because I was like, what? So you're saying I'll never know? I will never know if my right toe is gonna fall off or my eye is gonna twitch like this when I turn like 22? Like, so in the end of the world, I'm gonna start catastrophizing stuff, right? And what catastrophizing is like, because it's raining, the world's going to split into half. Like, that's catastrophizing. It's like thinking the worst, irrational thinking. You know, Albert Ellis is one of the things that he's one of the theorists that, you know, within cognitive behavior therapy, you know, he says, you know, irrational thoughts within rational thoughts. And so that's where I was like irrationalizing my whole life. Like, my right toe is going to fall off and my eyes going to start twitching. But these are the things to consider also, right? If you are deciding, hey, I'm going to let my child come up for adoption, but this is going to be a closed adoption. So the medical history, you know, finding out, you know, they might feel, hey, abandoned, or they might feel different, or, you know, they don't look like this, you know, feeling like the outsider, right? Nobody likes to feel like the outsider. Nobody likes to feel like, hey, I don't belong here. Why am I here? Don't touch me. No. Right? But those are actually things that will happen to that child. Some of them. I don't want to say all of them. So also be mindful. You know, some of these things might actually happen to the child. Next slide. Okay. Defense mechanisms, right? I put a little emoji guy on there like sweating. That's my emoji the most that I use, because I'm like, and of course the guy with the shades on. So mechanisms, you know, descriptions and examples. So defense mechanisms, you know, there's a lot of repression, denial, projection, displacement, regression, sublimation. So this just basically says that some adoptees also deal with, you know, defense mechanisms. You know, it says during the Oedipus complex, aggressive thoughts about the same as parents are repressed. So they might say, hey, you know, I don't feel like I can control this thing. So they might actually, you know, the thoughts of becoming conscious, and they might not, you know, going between like the id, ego, and the super ego, right? Freudian. So he was a psychosocial developmental theorist that thought, you know, id, ego, super ego. Then you've got the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages of the development of the child. So this just, you know, talks about the disturbance of those things. Denial, For example, smokers may refuse to admit to themselves that smoking is not bad for their health. So they say, hey, I won't get sick. I can do this. But doing certain things will cause your body to respond in a way that will cause more issues with your health in the future. Projection. If you hate someone, but your strength super ego tells you that such hatred is unacceptable, you can solve the problem by believing that they hate you. So projection is like projecting your thoughts or your feelings out on someone else that has nothing to do with the issues that you're facing, right? Projection. So displacement, someone who is frustrated by their boss at work may go home and kick the dog. Okay, so I have a little chihuahua, and I do not believe in doing those things, taking the anger out on someone who has nothing to do with why you are mad. You know, one of the things that you can do in order to not be displaced is to accept the situation, feel the feeling that you're feeling. Maybe it's rejection. Maybe it's abandonment. Maybe it's both. But that particular child does not deserve that anger that comes rooted within the things that you are dealing with, right? Regression. This is a movement back in psychological time when it was faced with stress. So they might end up, sucking their thumb. It says wetting the bed when they need to go spend some time in the hospital. There are regression ways that child might feel that should be considered. Sublimation, satisfying an impulse. Aggression, there's something that they're getting from that, putting your aggression on someone else, like I said, that has nothing to do with why you are really mad. And in this field, you guys know, I know there's so much burnout because I work in this field. I am aware of it. There's so much burnout that happens in this field. And so just becoming aware of your own feelings, feeling that aggression, feeling that anger, feeling that abandonment, feeling those things that you're dealing with at home. One thing that I took when I was working in Austin before I transferred to Dallas was you have to leave your issues on the shelf. Pick a particular area in your home. Don't allow yourself to, do these things to other people, when you have to feel that actual feeling, and it's not fair. So leave those things at home. Leave it at home. Be good to yourself, or else burnout is going to occur and you'll take it out on someone else who has nothing to do with it. And even yourself, be good to yourself. You deserve it. You genuinely deserve it. Next slide. Abandonment. So I was talking briefly about this. Abandonment issues don't always come from childhood trauma. They might come from a divorce. They might come from a death. They might come from issues that you're even unaware of. Trauma is so silent. It is so super silent, but it is also deadly. And so address those trauma issues, address those abandonment issues. You're not alone. You are allowing things around you to dictate things inside of you. I'll say that again. You are allowing things around you to dictate things inside of you. Be good to yourself. You're not alone. And so it comes from relationships, childhood loss. Other factors are turned loss into abandonment. Environmental, medical. Maybe you're dealing with something and you have fears of dying, grief. These are also some things that adoptees will deal with as well. Genetics. brain chemistry. Emotional abandonment occurs when parents, they don't let their child express themselves emotionally, ridicule their children, put too much pressure on their children to be perfect. And lastly, treat their children like their peers. And so as I said in the beginning of my particular presentation, that a lot of my trauma came from my childhood. And I think a lot of regression and a lot of that abandonment and rejection things that I dealt with was because there was a specific type of place where I had to live up to expectations. And so I felt the pressures of that and I could not function. It was so hard for me to function as a growing child because I was sheltered. And so thank God that I didn't allow those sheltered moments to dictate. And so you are looking at somebody that has experienced so much in life, but has utilized those things to make her a better person. And that's what my encouragement is to you, is to be good to yourself. Utilize those things that you've experienced in life and use those things to actually project you. Next slide. Okay. So meeting my biological family. So this was probably one of the most important times in my life where I was able to see finally my mother and my biological grandmother to finally meet. I tried so hard. And there was just so much discomfort. But if you are an adoptive parent, know that if this happens, there's going to be awkward moments. You're going to feel a lot of emotions. You're going to feel rejected. You're going to feel abandoned. You're going to feel like your whole life you've wasted time on this child just to allow them to finally meet their biological family. And now they're rejecting you. They don't want anything to do with you. For me, that wasn't the case. I have one family, and my family is my family. I do not treat anyone differently. And so if this ever happens to you, or you ever can witness something like this happening, understand and tell that person, no matter what stage of that life that this child is in, there's going to be awkward moments. They're going to feel some uncomfortable feelings. And it's natural. It's supernatural to feel those things. But have those conversations with that child. Understand them, and know that it's really not about you. It's really about that child or that adult, and it says you may have a lot in common. They may or may not be interested in getting to know you. This is for the adoptive family and the biological family. But this particular video is when my grandmother met my adopted mother during Christmas. You can go ahead and play the video. It's a video.
You have a blessed Christmas. May God bless you, Stuart and Shirley Howard, Ereka's adopted parents, 2018. 7.
Yeah, I understand.
And so that video it gives me chills because there were so many years. I had reunited with my biological family in 2008, right? And so seeing this, it gave me a sense of closure, like understanding, yes, it finally happened, because I didn't want anybody to feel like I didn't love them more than I loved the other. Family is family. Next slide. So pay attention to this particular quote. It says, we repeat what we don't repair. We repeat what we don't repair. And yes, I'm an adoptee, but I would be so selfish if I didn't address whether if you're not adopted, whether if you come from a different family, a broken family, and you were never taken away from that family for safety, you know, but this goes for life in general. We repeat what we don't repair. It's okay to repair those things. It's okay to go back into the past and repair those things so that the people that you interact with in the future, you don't be defensive, you know? So thank you guys so much. I hope that you learned a lot. And Jess, you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a time for you to, if you want to stay in contact with me, I do have social media. I do have social media engines or tags, or what do they call it? I don't even know what they call it, but like I have social media information, my Instagram, my IG, my Facebook, my TikTok, and my personal website is on the bottom. So feel free to follow me on social media. I do want to say this. I do want to say this. I am a ball of energy. I'm a ball of energy. Literally, I was telling Jess and Ashley, I literally have a ball that I'm sitting on. It's like a therapeutic ball. I don't really know the exact name, but I'm sitting on it. But I'm a ball of energy. So I do want to tell you, I apologize. No, I don't. I hope you actually take the time to follow me. It's been a pleasure and an honor to provide these 2 trainings with you. And Jess and Ashley, thank you guys so much for allowing me to do this. And hearts ever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ereka. We have lots of thank you for sharing your experiences and smiley face hearts claps coming in for you. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Just a few closing items. If you would like more information about Gladney, please reach out. We would love to set up a lunch and learn and teach you more about Gladney services and what we have to offer. We also have a lot of amazing upcoming trainings, so be sure to check those out on our website. And as I mentioned in the chat earlier, the first part of this training, if you missed it, is up on our YouTube, and this one will be up as well. Again, when we close this out, these CEUs pop-up will pop up. Please make sure you fill this out if you're needing CEUs or certificates of completion. Thank you, everybody.